I'm Margaret in Windsor, and I've been having trouble with the sound. I hope it's fixed now. Anyway, I'm making this video about Reverend Andrew Young. He was with Reverend Martin Luther King when he was shot and killed by a program shooter in Memphis, Tennessee. And he had worked closely with Reverend King over the years. And I want to draw your attention to Selma, Alabama, and all that went on there, the civil rights and all that. You've heard about all this over and over. What you haven't heard about, and those that have, very few have taken action to help. I lived, if you call it living, in Moulton, Alabama, not all that many miles from Selma. And near Huntsville, Alabama, the Space Center, NASA, that became the Space Center 1956. I was kidnapped in 41 and brought to Moulton, Alabama, to a shack, into a family that was so sick and abused beyond belief. The woman, Lina Dempsey, had twins, and I didn't find this out till 1983, late 83. Lina Dempsey had twins born out of wedlock named Peggy and Carl Dempsey. So they were illegitimate. Back then, they were called bastards, and my ID was stolen when I was brought there, and I was given her name. Of course, Carl was dead. I didn't know that she was. I had inherited, so to speak, her name. And I was often ridiculed, told I didn't have a father, and that I was a bastard. In school, I was called bastard, and someone got up and made an announcement about it more than once. I wore rags, if you can call them rags, and I ate garbage. There's no other word for it. Dirty, filthy garbage. Now, I want to say this. King Edward VIII is my father. A great man who has been so lied about, and that was the whole thing. The character assassination, plot to take him down, and they did. And I want to put this in before I finish my little narrative, if you want to call it, or synopsis of Reverend King. Let me emphasize the word Reverend. Martin Luther King, Reverend Young, Andrew Young. I am losing my train of thought now. Wouldn't you know? Hadn't done that until just a minute ago. I put up two of these, but that's not interesting. But anyway, I lived there in Moulton. Grew up in that atmosphere. Found out about my kidnapping in 83. I said that, I think, late 83. My dad was married to Claudia Ruth O'Keefe, an American school teacher, sister to artist Georgia O'Keefe. So I say that because nobody's ever heard of my mom. And my mom is a beautiful lady. My dad was married to my mom, 36. He abdicated in 36 December. My dad and mom stayed married. They never divorced or anything. They were alive when I came to Roanoke, October of 86, and they remained married till they died. So this whole thing has been such a lie, and Winston Churchill destroyed, burned records, which in part was my father's marriage to my mom, and then my birth in 1939. So history would tell you that my father abdicated to marry American, they don't say spy, but she was, Wallace Warfield Simpson, which was also a lie. Wallace Simpson married an impostor, a double, they became the illegal title of Duke and Duchess of Windsor. In 1937 was when my uncle, Elizabeth's father, illegal George VI, became the illegal monarch. Same year that the two thugs, Simpson and the double, married. So Elizabeth and her family moved into Buckingham Palace. My dad was moved out. However, later, I have a picture that I put up on YouTube and Facebook, and I have put it in and packed it, and I just did not feel, I've taken it out so many times, of Wallace Simpson and the double and my dad, and most of all my uncle George. Well, in the year I was born, 1939, he and Roosevelt and their families were at Hyde Park, and this was a big festival. I Googled it, and I have pictures of that I put up. They were planning my kidnapping in 41. They hadn't quite gotten rid of my father. My father had an addendum, and it is legal, but then you have to be able to enforce it. That stated, should an heir be born, his heir be born, the heir would not be disinherited. The heir would inherit the throne. I was born in 39. The day I was born, Queen Victoria II, legal heir. And Elizabeth, everybody knew about my father being married to my mom. This talk about marrying Wallace, she was twice divorcee and all this, that didn't apply to my dad. That was a total lie. So anyway, I'm saying a lot because I've been doing this and putting it up, and it seems to go somewhere, but not really. And people believe it. It's just that I find that time goes by, and a lot of people are ready to, oh, well, don't bring that up. You know, the fact that my father was taken down, and me and my mom, and history's a lie. And by the way, after they kidnapped me is when, and this is what I was going to put up here, so let me get this up, and let me say this. Elizabeth lived in Buckingham Palace, and when I was born, my dad moved back in because he was supposed to be my power of attorney, and I'm the monarch when I was born, and guardian. Well, we moved back into Buckingham Palace, and therein is when Elizabeth, I mean, she always knew about me, my mom, Claudia Ruth O'Keefe, and my dad, that it was all a lie about Simpson and his marrying her. Yes, she has stayed quiet. She never speaks of me or what happened. She's illegal. And she has been through for Virginia here when I was living, freezing and starving, or had the winters prior, up on Fullheart Knob, the forestry, the trail there. She came right through Roanoke, and she made a speech in Richmond at the Capitol there, the Senate, I believe. So now if I can get my train of thought back, I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm tired, and I've done this so much, so excuse me. But what I wanted, after my kidnapping, is when there were illegal treaties that allowed, the United States had put us out. And they're talking about Julian Assange. He's told the truth. He hasn't interfered in anything unless telling the truth is. What the United States and my uncle, the Illuminati, the Rockefellers, David Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Bilderbergers, and so much the Kennedys. Kennedy was appointed Joe Kennedy ambassador, 36, listen at the dates, till he was kicked out in 46. Now then, JFK, his son, flew in and out prior to my birth and after, and he helped in my kidnapping. John F. Kennedy did. That's why the Warren Commission covered it up. That's after then is when the Jews went back to Israel, and it became a state. And the Jews were a big part of the Illuminati, the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Bilderbergers, etc. And Roosevelt, the family of Roosevelts were really a part of this whole thing and remain so. And it gets into presidents here in the States knew about my kidnapping, the State Department, Henry Kissinger. God knows you should be able, forced to tell what was on the 18-minute gap of the Watergate tapes, what Henry Kissinger was doing, and what he was going to have done if the Brits didn't follow through. I wish you would all have to see that. So now then, also the treaties, illegal treaties, because the United States put in their own monarch then, is what they did. Talk about interfering in another country's election, or in my case, it was taking down my father, a monarch, and kidnapping a monarch, and torture, and you name it. And treaties that were no good because they were signed by Elizabeth and her father. Anyway, they allowed the United States to come in under the guise of being good, saving Great Britain, when in fact they invaded us. Positioned themselves in the UK to where they controlled my relatives, who are cousins and monarchs, the same kin to me as they are Elizabeth. And that's Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and the Netherlands. Queen Beatrix, very wealthy, but she caved in. She really, just look at what's housed there. I couldn't put this or get it put in war criminals, because the crime where you prosecute it is I'm babbling, I don't know why right at the moment, I'm not this tired, is in the Netherlands. So look at all the things associated with the global government and war crimes and all that. They're in the Netherlands, except for the United States. They've got the Freemason, New York City, the headquarters, the Rockefellers' headquarters, the Illuminati, and the United Nations, which is where I'm going to say here. The United Nations became the United Nations right after then. So that's where the Jews, the Rockefellers, started tying up the countries and their leaders, so that, and this is where it's at now, all the countries are under one government, if you want to call it that, family of people, and easy to control. There will be no borders, as now that's where it's going, and people are becoming more blended. But where's it all going in the long run? The one family controls everything. And people will probably cave in, and what's helping them to get it is they're into programming, like the programming at Virginia Tech, and that's what I was writing about, a book about in '78 when Larry Flint was shot in Lawrenceville, Georgia, and that was a program shooter. And you can program armies now, but some of these can be proven in the murders because they were done in patterns, but that's what they're into. And that's the global government is really in place now. And I'm getting away from the other things. You had NATO, you had all these Geneva Convention, all these things. Geneva Convention to protect you, supposedly. And here and that's when it all, after they took down my dad and kidnapped me, the world changed. In the United States, and part of my family and the Illuminati became in power, and the Freemasons. So now then I want to get to Atlanta. I've tried to put up on Facebook and YouTube about things that torture that never stopped. I had a letter from the FBI, June the 23rd of '79, stating ongoing investigation, national security involved. And I've put this up too, so I'm not going to reiterate on this. I thought all the things that were happening to me, they were terrifying my children, my two sons, me, doing horrible things. I went to the TV stations, I went everywhere, to Cobb County, District Attorney, etc., the law enforcement. And I'm going to really jump to this. I went to mid-March, about the 8th of March of '80, I went on a trip out to Texas. I had talked to my ex-husband's sister, Laura Childers Klein. They were CPAs, and she was going to see if she could help me with the job. and let me stay there for a couple of weeks. If I got a job, I was going to relocate bring my children out to get them away from that. I didn't know about the reason they were being done to me was my kidnapping, and who I am. So when I got out to Dallas, I called her and I said, I'm about 4 hours away. And she said she'd changed her mind. I could no longer come, and she hung up on me. I was shocked. I went back to Marietta, Atlanta, and I found that the manager there had allowed my ex-husband to come in and allowed him to sign a new lease in his name, use my security deposit, and it was in the same complex, and to move my furniture. He now had everything of mine. And the last of that month, which is April the 1st, I was having so much trouble, so sick there at the apartment. I know now why. I'm allergic to chemicals. I have an autoimmune disorder. And toxic fumes trigger my immune system to attack itself, and it causes inflammation and can really do you harm over time. But my immune system would get so low and everything. So anyway, I won't dwell on that. I went to spend the night with Lois Pearson, who I thought was a friend. Well, it was all planned. I had antifreeze put in me that night. Next morning, I knew I was dying if I didn't get to the doctor and have a tox to see what had been put in me. When I got there, it was a setup. I had Dr. Chelton, who's part of the Parkland out in Dallas where Kennedy was taken, the Gonzalez people, and this doctor wasn't even supposed to be at this hospital. He wasn't on their staff. And anyway, the tox screen was never done, and a lot more happened that was horrible. It ended up that the tox screen was finally done in Huntsville, and I'm skipping what happened there. It's a horror story in itself. Having antifreeze put in you, if you ever want to live in hell, and I should have died, but that's hell. They burn your brain. That burns your brain and everything. It was awful. I should have been a vegetable and just died, Instead, I was shoved in a car that day before Easter, which would have been April the 5th. The 6th was Sunday Easter. Shoved in a car, and Lina Dempsey, the mother of the twins, a psychopath, and she was diagnosed a psychopath. I was shoved in the car and carried over the state line, and the tox screen was done there. I'm not going to get in. I'm taking up time here. Anyway, I put all this up. I went to work for the district attorney in last May, I believe, and passed a background check in the condition I was in by Sheriff Patterson of Madison County Sheriff Department, Huntsville. Okay, now I'm going to skip back to, I went back to Atlanta. And I was trying to get my apartment back, and I had a divorce decree that should have given me money and left me, according to the courts, a retirement. When my husband, a life insurance, which I've never gotten my hands on or can't even get anybody to help me with it. Trying to find it, R.J. Reynolds. He worked for R.J. Reynolds. So I go back there, and I'm trying to get back to my children, and because I was terrified that they were going to be killed in all this. And instead, I ended up homeless, and I'm leaving, like I say, a lot of this out, and I'm not getting to Andrew Young's part. I'm trying to. But it was freezing. It was cold. I think it was November, December. And I was downtown. I had flip-flops on, staying in a homeless shelter, and it was horrible. What can I say? I had 40 women, it seemed like, or 20 at least. And I went to Mrs. King, and